When is the wedding? It was a simple question, spoken with a smile. Renata's voice carried hope, warmth, and excitement. She had been waiting for this day for months, maybe even years. Her only son Max had finally found love, and Renata wanted nothing more than to see him happy. But the answer that came back was like a knife to her chest. Lena, her soon-to-be daughter-in-law, looked at her with a blank face, as if she were discussing something ordinary, something unimportant. And then Lena said the words Renata would never forget. "We got married yesterday." The world seemed to stop. Renata felt the air leave her lungs. Her ears buzzed. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. "Yesterday?" Renata whispered, her voice trembling. What do you mean yesterday?" Lena shrugged. "It was small. Just us. Only special people. Only special people." The words crashed over Renata like icy water. She wasn't special. She, the woman who raised Max on her own, who worked double shifts to feed him, who poured her entire savings into his future, was not special enough to be there. She felt her hands shaking. Her lips trembled. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She wanted to ask Max directly, but he wasn't even in the room. He hadn't come to tell her himself. He had sent Lena. Renata sat down slowly, as if her knees might give out. She tried to keep her voice calm, but the storm inside her was impossible to hide. "I don't understand," she said. Why didn't you tell me? I thought we were planning a wedding. I thought I was helping. I gave." Her voice cracked. She remembered the check she had written, the thousands of dollars she had given for the big day. $20,000 in total. She had paid deposits for the venue, the photographer, even the dress. And yet, she wasn't invited. Her eyes burned with tears. Lena folded her arms. "It was easier this way. Less drama. We wanted it private." Private. That word sliced through her chest again. Because if the wedding was truly private, then where did her money go? Renata's tears spilled over. She tried to wipe them away quickly, embarrassed by her own pain. But Lena didn't comfort her. She didn't apologize. She just stood there, cold, distant, unmoved. Renata thought back to all the nights she stayed awake worrying about Max. She thought of his childhood illnesses, the broken bones, the late-night emergency room visits. She thought of the meals she skipped so he could eat. She thought of the part-time jobs, the second-hand clothes, the sacrifices she made just to give him a chance at a better life. And this was her reward? Not just exclusion. Betrayal. Her heart ached with a weight she had never known before. She felt old, invisible, discarded. That night, Renata sat alone in her living room, staring at the walls. Her wedding dress from years ago, now yellowed with time, hung in the back of her closet. She remembered how proud her parents had been at her wedding, how loved she had felt. And now, her only son had robbed her of that joy. She picked up the framed photo of Max as a boy, his gap-toothed smile, his small hand gripping hers. "Why, Max?" she whispered to the empty room. "Why didn't you want me there?" The silence answered back. Renata's tears turned to anger. She thought about the checks, the transfers, the gifts. She had believed love could be shown with generosity. But maybe she had been blind. She wanted to believe this was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But deep inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. Maybe this wasn't just about the wedding. Maybe it was something bigger. The next morning, Renata decided to call Max directly. Her hands shook as she dialed his number. She prayed he would explain, that he would apologize, that this nightmare was just a cruel accident. "Hello." Max's voice was flat, tired. "Max," Renata whispered. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you invite me to your wedding?" There was a long pause. Then Max sighed. "Mom, it was Lena's idea. She wanted something small. I didn't want to fight about it." Renata's heart dropped. He didn't fight for her. He didn't stand up for her. "After everything I've done for you," she said, her voice breaking. "After everything I gave, was I really not important enough?" Max was silent for a long time. Finally, he muttered, "Mom, Don't make this about you. We're happy. That's what matters.
Don't make this about you.
Renata felt the ground vanish beneath her. She wanted to shout, to tell him how cruel those words were. But her throat closed. She hung up without another word. For the first time in her life, Renata felt truly abandoned. Not by strangers, not by acquaintances, but by her own flesh and blood. The pain settled deep inside her chest. But along with the pain came something else. A whisper. A warning. Something is wrong. This wasn't just a careless mistake. This was deliberate.
Planned.
Calculated. Renata stared out the window, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Her tears dried, leaving behind a new feeling she couldn't quite name. It was the beginning of suspicion. It was the spark of awakening. And it scared her. Because if her own son could betray her like this, what else was he capable of? The silence after Renata hung up the phone did not last long. 2 days later, there was a knock at her door. Not the gentle kind. A sharp, heavy pounding that made her heart race. When she opened it, Max and Lena stood there. Lena's arms were crossed, her lips curled into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. Max looked tense, his jaw clenched. "Mom," Max said quickly, "we need to talk." Renata stepped back, uncertain. Her home had always been her safe place, her quiet corner of the world. But as they walked in without waiting for her permission, it no longer felt safe. It felt invaded. They sat on her couch, side by side like a wall. Renata sat across from them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Lena spoke first. "We're very disappointed in you, Renata." The words struck like whips. Disappointed in me? Renata thought. After everything I've done? "You know we count on your support," Lena continued smoothly. "We just started our life together. We have bills, responsibilities. You cutting us off right now is cruel. Honestly, it feels selfish." Selfish. Renata's stomach twisted. She had been called many things in her life. Kind, giving, dependable, but never selfish. Max leaned forward. "Mom, you raised me better than this. You taught me family helps each other. Isn't that what you always said?" Renata felt her chest tighten. They were using her own words, her own love, against her. For a moment she almost broke. She almost said, "You're right. I'll send the money again." But then she remembered the notebook. The numbers. The way Lena had said, "Only special people." Her heart hardened. "No," Renata said, her voice shaking but firm. "I've given more than enough. $33,000. And what did I get in return?"
Lies.
Secrets. Exclusion. I can't do it anymore. Max's face turned red. "Mom, don't exaggerate. You're confused. You don't understand." "Confused?" Renata snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. I know exactly what I've done for you. And I know exactly how you've treated me." The room went cold. Max stared at her as if he didn't recognize her. Lena's smile faded into a sneer. "You know," Lena said softly, "maybe you're not thinking clearly. At your age, people forget things. They get mixed up. Maybe that's what's happening here." Renata froze. The words were quiet, but the meaning was loud. They were not just accusing her of selfishness. They were planting a seed that she was losing her mind. She stood up, her hands trembling. "Get out," she whispered. "Mom," Max started. "Out," Renata shouted, louder than she had in years. Her voice echoed through the house. For a moment, even she was shocked by her own strength. Max and Lena exchanged a glance. Then, without another word, they stood and walked out. But as the door closed behind them, Renata's relief was short-lived. Because she knew they weren't done. The following week, Renata noticed strange things. Her mailbox was left open. Papers shifted on her desk when she hadn't touched them. Once, she came home from the store and found her back door unlocked, though she was certain she had locked it. Then she remembered. Max still had a spare key. Fear gnawed at her chest. This was no longer just emotional. It was becoming dangerous. Renata needed help. She called her neighbor, Eleanor, a retired nurse who had always been kind. Eleanor came over right away, bringing tea and a listening ear. When Renata poured out her story, Eleanor squeezed her hand. "You're not crazy," Eleanor said firmly. "This is called elder financial abuse. I've seen it before. They're trying to control you, Renata. But you don't have to let them." Elder financial abuse. The words hit like lightning. Renata had never thought of herself as a victim of abuse. That was something that happened to other people. But now, the pieces clicked together. The money, the manipulation, the accusations of confusion. "What can I do?" Renata whispered. "You get a lawyer," Eleanor said. "And you protect yourself before they try something worse." 2 days later, Renata sat in the office of Mr. Weber, a calm, gray-haired lawyer with kind eyes. He listened carefully as she explained everything, every dollar given, every insult thrown, every fear she had. When she finished, Mr. Weber leaned forward. "Renata, you've done the right thing by coming here. What they're doing isn't just wrong, it's illegal. They may try to push for guardianship, claiming you can't handle your own affairs.
But don't worry.
We'll prepare. We'll document everything. And we'll prove you're competent and independent." Renata's chest loosened for the first time in weeks. Someone believed her. Someone was on her side. Mr. Weber gave her homework. Keep a journal of every call, every visit, every strange incident. Change her locks. Cancel any access Max and Lena had to her bank accounts. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. For the first time, Renata felt like she wasn't fighting alone. But Max and Lena weren't backing down. One evening, her phone buzzed with a text from Max. "Mom, you're making a big mistake. If you don't help us, we'll have no choice but to take legal steps. You clearly can't manage things anymore. It's for your own good." Renata's hands shook as she read the words. They were threatening her. Her own son. She grabbed her journal and wrote it all down, word for word. Then she locked it in her desk drawer. The fear was still there. But beneath it, something else burned stronger now. Determination. For 72 years, Renata had lived as a giver, a sacrificer, a quiet supporter. But now, she was becoming something new. A fighter. She didn't know how the battle would end. But she knew one thing. She would no longer bow, no longer surrender, no longer let her own blood drain her dry. And as the shadows of night stretched across her house, Renata whispered to herself, "They picked the wrong woman to underestimate." Renata woke up the next morning with swollen eyes. She had barely slept. The silence of her house felt louder than ever, filled with echoes of words she couldn't forget. "Only special people. Don't make this about you." She replayed the moments over and over in her mind, like a broken record. At first, she told herself maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe she was overreacting. But deep inside, a new voice kept whispering, "Wake up, Renata. Look closer."
So she did.
She pulled out an old notebook from her desk. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but Renata had always used it to keep track of her expenses. Not everything was written down, but enough. She began flipping through, her finger tracing the numbers. There was the $1,200 for Max's rent when he first moved in with Lena, the $600 for their broken-down car, the $300 for Lena's emergency dental surgery, the $800 for groceries when they were short that month, the $2,500 for furniture in their new apartment, and the biggest of all, the $20,000 for the wedding that never happened. Renata sat back, her breath catching in her throat. Her hand trembled as she did the math. She added it all together, again and again, just to make sure she wasn't mistaken. $33,400. That was how much she had given. Silently. Freely. Out of love. And what had she received in return? Exclusion. Silence. Betrayal. Renata pressed her hands to her face. Tears stung her eyes, but this time they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of anger. She remembered the way she used to smile when Max called. How she'd rush to her purse, eager to help, happy to give. She thought it made her a good mother. She thought it showed love. But now she wondered if it only made her easy to use. She thought about the pattern. Every time they needed something, they came running. Every time she said yes, they smiled and promised to make it up to her. But they never did. And the moment she was no longer needed, she was cut out, like an old photograph shoved in a drawer. For the first time, Renata asked herself a dangerous question. Have I been nothing more than a wallet to them? The thought made her stomach twist. She didn't want to believe it. She wanted to believe Max loved her, deeply, honestly, like a son should. But the facts sat in front of her, written in ink and numbers. And facts don't lie. That night, Renata sat in her favorite armchair with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The old clock ticked on the wall, steady, relentless. She stared at the numbers again. $33,400. That could have been new windows for her house. That could have been a small trip she'd always dreamed of taking. That could have been her savings for the future. But instead, it was gone. Gone into the pockets of two people who hadn't even thought her special enough to stand by them on their wedding day. Renata's chest tightened. For 72 years, she had been kind. She had been generous. She had believed that love meant sacrifice. But now she saw something else. Love without respect is not love at all. Her hands shook as she picked up her pen. She opened her checkbook. She stared at the automatic transfer she had set up for Max and Lena, $200 every month, just to help. It was still scheduled, ready to drain from her account next week. For a moment, she hesitated. Part of her whispered, "Don't do it. What if they get angry? What if they stop speaking to you? What if you lose your son forever?" But another voice, stronger now, rose up inside her. "You've already lost him. At least this way, you keep your dignity." Renata's breath shook, but she found her courage. With one firm stroke of her pen, she canceled the transfer.
Click.
The sound of the pen snapping shut felt like the sound of chains breaking. She sat back, her chest heaving. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of power. Small, fragile, but real. The next day, Max called. "Mom," he said, his tone casual. "Hey, did you send the transfer this month? We didn't see it come through." Renata's hands trembled, but she gripped the phone tighter. "No," she said, steadying her voice. "I canceled it." Silence. "Canceled?" Max finally said. "What do you mean canceled?" "I mean," Renata said, her voice stronger now, "that I can't keep sending you money. I've done enough. More than enough." Another silence. Then Max's voice hardened. "Mom, don't do this. You know we count on you. Lena's upset already. You can't just stop." Renata closed her eyes, fighting the tears. "Yes, Max. I can. And I have." She hung up before he could answer. Her heart pounded in her chest. She felt both terrified and alive. For once, she had said a no. But even as she sat there, shaking, she knew this was only the beginning. Max and Lena wouldn't accept it quietly. They wouldn't walk away. She had lit a fuse. And the explosion was coming. Renata looked out her window into the dark night, the shadows stretching long and sharp across her lawn. For years, she had thought her home was safe, her family her anchor. But now she wasn't so sure. Because when people are used to controlling you, and you finally resist, something dangerous awakens. And Renata could feel it, deep in her bones. The battle was coming. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm. Renata stood outside the courthouse, her hands clutching her purse. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she felt like that frightened woman again. The one who had cried alone in her living room, broken by betrayal. But then she took a deep breath. She remembered Eleanor's kind words, Mr. Weber's steady guidance, and the courage she had found in herself. She lifted her chin. She was not here as a victim. She was here as a survivor. Inside the courtroom, Max and Lena sat with their lawyer. Max wouldn't meet her eyes. Lena, however, stared straight at her with a smirk, as if she had already won. Renata sat beside Mr. Weber, who gave her a reassuring nod. The judge entered, and the trial began. Max's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of Renata as confused, forgetful, and vulnerable. He argued that she couldn't manage her finances and needed her son's guardianship. Renata's blood boiled. To hear strangers describe her as if she were a child, helpless, weak, was unbearable. But she stayed quiet, just as Mr. Weber had instructed. Then it was their turn. Mr. Weber rose, calm and confident. He presented Renata's notebook, every expense carefully documented. He showed the transfers, the checks, the receipts, proof of over $33,400 given out of love. Proof of a pattern of exploitation. He read aloud Max's threatening text. "You clearly can't manage things anymore. It's for your own good." The courtroom went silent. Then, Mr. Weber asked Renata to take the stand. She walked slowly, her knees trembling, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear, steady, strong. "I may be 72, she said, looking directly at the judge, "but I am not confused. I am not weak. I have lived alone for 20 years, paid every bill, managed every account. What I am is a mother who gave too much, who believed love was about sacrifice. And now I see, I was being used." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. "I am here today not just for myself, but for anyone who has ever been told they are too old, too fragile, too worthless to stand up for themselves. I may be older, but I am not powerless." Her words hung in the air like a spark. The judge nodded slowly. After reviewing the evidence, after listening to both sides, the decision came. The judge ruled in Renata's favor. Her competence was affirmed. The guardianship request was denied. And Max and Lena's intentions were laid bare for everyone to see. Greed, manipulation, abuse. Renata closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not of pain this time, but of relief. She had won. The days that followed were a blur of change. Renata changed the locks on her doors. She closed old bank accounts and opened new ones, safe from wandering hands. She sold her large house, too many shadows, too many memories, and bought a smaller apartment filled with light. For the first time in decades, she decorated for herself, not for anyone else. She hung bright paintings, filled the shelves with books, and planted flowers on her balcony. Her laughter returned, slowly at first, then freely. Eleanor came over often, bringing tea and company. Other neighbors, hearing her story, began to share their own. She realized she was not alone. Too many people had lived through the same betrayal in silence. So Renata made a decision. She donated a portion of her savings to an organization that protects seniors from abuse. She wanted others to find their voices, just as she had found hers. And she began painting again, something she had loved as a young woman but abandoned when life became too heavy. Her canvases filled with color, with hope, with freedom. One evening, she sat on her balcony, the city glowing in the distance. She held a brush in her hand, but paused to watch the sunset. She smiled. Not because everything was perfect, not because the scars were gone, but because, for the first time in years, she was free. And freedom was priceless. Renata's story is not just her own. It is a warning and a beacon. How many of us give until there's nothing left, believing it will buy us love? How many of us stay silent, afraid to lose the people we care about, even when those people are hurting us? Renata's journey shows us that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. It's never too late to set boundaries. And it's never too late to say, enough. If Renata's story touched you, if it opened your eyes, then don't let it end here. Like this video to honor her courage. Share it because someone you know may be living through the same silent abuse. And subscribe for more true stories that remind us we are stronger than we think, and it's never too late to fight back. Remember this: love without respect is not love at all. Protect your dignity, stand your ground, and never be afraid to say I know.